For 5 years, Olivia Hartwell lived in a locked room in the basement of the home she thought would be her sanctuary. The man she loved, Marcus Chen, had promised her forever. But what she didn't know was that his family had discovered her secret, and they wanted her erased. This is the story of wealth, betrayal, and a woman who survived the unthinkable, only to come back and destroy everyone who tried to bury her. By the time the truth came out, 3 people were dead, a governor's career was destroyed, and the question everyone asked was, how did nobody know? Who was the woman locked in the basement? Why did Marcus Chen's family want her gone? And what explosive secret could destroy one of America's most powerful political families? Before we reveal what happened in that house, you need to understand 3 things. Olivia Hartwell wasn't just Marcus's fiancée. She was the daughter of Governor Robert Hartwell, one of the most powerful men in Virginia. And Marcus? He had no idea. Neither did his family, until the day before the wedding. What happened next would become one of the most twisted family crimes in modern American history. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Olivia Marie Hartwell grew up in 2 worlds. To the public, she was invisible, the governor's daughter who deliberately stayed out of the spotlight. Her father, Robert Hartwell, had built his political career on family values and privacy. Olivia honored that. She used her mother's maiden name, Olivia Mason, in her everyday life. She worked as a pediatric nurse in Richmond, drove a modest Honda Civic, and lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of the city. The kind of place where neighbors knew your first name, but nothing about your family. The kind of place where you could disappear into normalcy. But behind closed doors, Olivia was worth $47 million, a trust fund she'd never touched, waiting for her 30th birthday. She didn't want wealth. She wanted normal. Her father didn't understand it. Governor Robert Hartwell had built an empire on the Hartwell name. He'd served 3 terms, wielded influence that reached into every corner of Virginia politics, and had his eyes set on a Senate seat. He loved his daughter, in his own way, but he didn't understand her need to hide. To him, the Hartwell name was a gift. To Olivia, it was a cage. They'd fought about it for years. He wanted her at campaign events, charity galas, photo opportunities that showed the governor as a family man. She refused. She'd made a deal with him when she turned 25. If he let her live her life in private, she'd show up for the big moments, the important ones. He'd agreed, reluctantly. So Olivia became a ghost in her own family, present but not visible, loved but not understood. And then in March of 2018, everything changed. Olivia walked into Chen's Garden, a small Asian fusion restaurant in the historic district of Richmond, and ordered the house special, a dish her coworker had been raving about for weeks. The restaurant was busy, the kind of place where the owner knew regulars by name, and the kitchen smelled like ginger and garlic and home. Marcus Chen brought her order to the table himself. He was handsome in an understated way, with kind eyes and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. They started talking. He asked about her day. She asked about the restaurant. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. When she left that night, Marcus had slipped his number onto her receipt with a simple note that read, "I'd love to cook for you again." She called him 3 days later. They went on their first date the following weekend. A simple walk along the James River followed by coffee at a tiny cafe that stayed open until midnight. Marcus was different from anyone Olivia had ever dated. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't talk about money or status or who he knew. He talked about his family, about how his mother Lynn had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but 2 suitcases and a dream, about how his father had died when Marcus was 12 and his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep the family afloat, about how opening the restaurant had been his father's dream and Marcus had made it his mission to make that dream real. He was genuine. He was grounded. He was everything Olivia had been searching for. They fell in love slowly, carefully, like 2 people who'd been hurt before and were afraid to rush. Marcus would cook for her after his shifts, teaching her how to make dumplings from scratch, laughing when hers came out lopsided and misshapen. Olivia would take him on hikes through the Blue Ridge Mountains, showing him trails she'd explored as a kid, sharing pieces of her childhood she'd never told anyone. They talked about everything, their fears, their dreams, their scars. Everything except one thing. Olivia never told Marcus her real last name. She never mentioned her father. She told herself it was because she wanted to be sure, to know that Marcus loved her for her, not for the power and money that came with being a Hartwell. She told herself she'd tell him soon. Just not yet. 6 months into their relationship, Marcus took Olivia to meet his family. The Chen home was a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where kids rode bikes in the street and neighbors borrowed sugar from each other. Lin Shun answered the door, a petite woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She welcomed Olivia with open arms, literally pulling her into a hug before she'd even stepped through the doorway. Marcus's younger sister Jade was there too, 28 years old, with her husband Derek Wu and their plans to start a family soon. The dinner was loud and chaotic and full of laughter. Lin kept piling food onto Olivia's plate, insisting she was too thin, asking about her work at the hospital, nodding approvingly when Olivia talked about her patients. By the end of the night, Lin had pulled Olivia aside and told her, "You're good for my son. I can see it in his eyes. He's happy again." Olivia felt like she'd found her place. This family, with their loud dinners and their easy affection and their complete lack of pretension, felt more like home than the governor's mansion ever had. She started spending more time at the Chun house, helping Lin with cooking, listening to stories about Marcus's childhood, becoming part of the family in a way that felt effortless. And through it all, she kept her secret. She told herself it didn't matter. These people loved her for who she was. The Hartwell name would only complicate things. She'd tell them eventually, after the engagement, after the wedding, when they were already family and nothing could change that. In October of 2018, Marcus proposed. They'd gone back to the James River, to the spot where they'd had their first date. It was sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, and Marcus got down on one knee and told her she'd made him believe in love again. The ring was simple, a small diamond on a silver band, nothing like the enormous rocks Olivia had seen on the hands of politicians' wives. It was perfect. She said yes without hesitation. They set the date for December 15th, 2 months away, a small ceremony with close family and friends. Olivia finally worked up the courage to tell Marcus the truth about who she was. She planned to do it 2 weeks before the wedding, on December 1st, over a quiet dinner at their favorite restaurant. She had it all planned out. She'd explain why she'd waited, make him understand that her feelings were real, that the secret was about protection, not deception. She practiced the conversation in her head 100 times. But someone else found out first. Lin Shun, being the protective mother she was, wanted to make sure her son was making the right choice. She'd seen Marcus heartbroken before, after his college girlfriend had cheated on him, after a relationship in his 20s had fallen apart when the woman admitted she'd only dated him to get close to his restaurant connections. Lin wasn't going to let her son get hurt again, so she did what she thought any good mother would do. She hired a private investigator. It was a small firm, discreet, the kind that specialized in background checks for concerned families. Lin told the investigator she just wanted to make sure Olivia Mason was who she said she was, that there were no hidden debts, no secret marriages, no skeletons that might hurt Marcus down the line. The investigator took the job. It should have been routine. What the investigator found changed everything. Olivia Mason didn't exist, not officially. The social security number matched, the nursing license was real, but when the investigator dug deeper, following the trail of documents and records, he found the truth. Olivia Mason was Olivia Marie Hartwell, daughter of Governor Robert Hartwell, heiress to a $47 million trust fund. The investigator delivered his report to Lin Shun on November 28, 2018, 17 days before the wedding. Lin read the report 3 times, sitting alone in her kitchen, her hands shaking. Her first emotion was betrayal. This woman, who'd sat at her table, who'd helped her cook, who'd smiled and laughed and pretended to be normal, had been lying the entire time. Her second emotion was fear, because Lin Chen had a secret too. The Chen family restaurants, all 3 locations, were drowning in debt. $280,000 owed to the bank, payments 3 months behind, foreclosure notices piling up. Lin had been hiding it from Marcus, from everyone, trying desperately to find a way out before the family lost everything her late husband had built. She'd taken out loans she couldn't repay. She'd borrowed from friends. She'd even considered selling the house. And now here was this woman, this rich woman who'd been pretending to be poor, about to marry her son. Lynn's mind raced. Was this some kind of setup? Was Olivia planning to marry Marcus and then bleed the family dry in a divorce? Was she playing some twisted game with their lives? The more Lynn thought about it, the more convinced she became that Olivia was a threat. Lynn called an emergency family meeting. Jade and Derek came over that night. Lynn showed them the investigator's report, watched their faces shift from confusion to shock to anger. Jade felt betrayed too. She'd confided in Olivia, shared her struggles with infertility, cried on her shoulder when another round of treatments had failed. And all along, Olivia had been lying about who she was. Derek was quieter, more analytical. He asked the questions Lynn hadn't wanted to face. Why would a governor's daughter hide her identity? What was her endgame? Was she trying to embarrass the family? Use them for some political purpose? The three of them talked for hours, spinning theories, each one darker than the last. By the time the sun came up, they'd convinced themselves that Olivia Hartwell was dangerous, and they needed to protect Marcus. Lynn's plan was simple. She'd confront Olivia, offer her money to walk away, and if Olivia refused, Lynn would tell Marcus the truth herself and let him make the choice. It was reasonable. It was fair. Or at least that's what Lynn told herself. On December 14th, 2018, the day before the wedding, Olivia arrived at the Chen family home for the rehearsal dinner. She was nervous, excited, carrying an overnight bag because she'd be staying in the guest room that night, tradition dictating she and Marcus spend their last night as an unmarried couple apart. She walked through the front door smiling, ready to finally come clean about her identity, to tell the family she loved the truth she should have told months ago. But Lynn was waiting. The confrontation happened in the kitchen. Jade and Derek were there too, standing like sentries on either side of the room. Lynn didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid the investigator's report on the counter and asked Olivia one question. Why did you lie to us? Olivia's face went pale. She tried to explain, stumbling over words, saying she'd planned to tell them, that she was going to tell Marcus in 2 days, that the secret wasn't about deception, but about wanting to be loved for herself. Lynn didn't believe her. She called Olivia a manipulator, a liar, a spoiled rich girl playing games with people's lives. The argument escalated quickly. Olivia defended herself, her voice rising, insisting her feelings for Marcus were real, that money had nothing to do with their relationship. Lynn shot back, asking why. If that were true, Olivia had hidden such a massive part of her identity. Why she'd let them believe she was a struggling nurse when she was worth more than their entire family combined. Then Lynn made her offer. $5 million. Walk away. Disappear. Never contact Marcus again. Sign a non-disclosure agreement, and the money would be wired to any account Olivia wanted. Lynn told her it was generous, more than fair, enough to let Olivia start over anywhere in the world. Olivia stared at Lynn like she'd been slapped. She refused. She told Lynn that she loved Marcus, that she wasn't going anywhere, that they'd work through this as a family. She turned to leave, to find Marcus, to tell him everything herself. That's when Jade stepped forward. What happened next is still disputed in court documents, testimony conflicting, memories hazy under the pressure of cross-examination. But here's what investigators pieced together. Jade had been researching, planning, preparing for this moment ever since Lynn had shared the investigator's report. She'd consulted with Derek, who worked in pharmaceutical sales and had access to medications most people never saw. Together, they'd come up with a solution. A temporary one, just to buy time. Jade offered Olivia a glass of water, told her she looked upset, that she should sit down, calm down, think clearly. Olivia, exhausted from the confrontation, accepted. She drank the water. Within 20 minutes, she felt dizzy. The room started spinning. She tried to stand, to call for help, but her legs wouldn't work. The last thing she remembered was Lynn's face, close to hers, whispering, "I'm sorry, but you gave us no choice." When Olivia woke up, everything had changed. She was in a basement. Not the Chen family home, somewhere else. The room was small, maybe 12 feet by 10 feet, with concrete walls and a single reinforced door. There was a bed, a toilet, a sink, a small table with a lamp. No windows. No phone. No way out. She screamed. She pounded on the door until her hands bled. No one came. It took Olivia 3 days to accept that this wasn't a nightmare she could wake up from. This was real. The Chen family, the people she'd thought of as her second family, had kidnapped her. They'd locked her in a basement and left her there to rot. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know if anyone was looking for her. She didn't know if she'd ever see daylight again. The only human contact she had was Lin Chun, who came once a week with groceries and supplies. Lin would unlock the door, slide the food inside, and leave without saying a word. Olivia begged. She pleaded. She promised she'd disappear, that she'd sign whatever papers they wanted, that she'd never tell anyone what happened. Lin never responded. Just dead eyes and silence, and the sound of the lock clicking back into place. Meanwhile, 40 miles away in Richmond, Marcus Chen was living through his own nightmare. On the morning of December 15th, his wedding day, he woke up to a text message from Olivia's phone. It was short, brutal, final. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. Don't try to find me." Marcus didn't believe it at first. He called her phone, over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. He drove to her apartment, but she wasn't there. Her landlord said she'd left the night before with a suitcase, said she was going out of town for a few days. Marcus went to the hospital where Olivia worked, but her supervisor said she'd called in sick. Everything pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Olivia had run away, left him at the altar, destroyed him without explanation. His mother found him sitting in his car outside the church, still in his tuxedo, staring at nothing. Lynn held him while he cried. She told him it wasn't his fault, that some people were just broken inside, that he'd dodged a bullet. She never mentioned the investigator's report. She never told him who Olivia really was. The wedding was canceled. The guests were sent home. Marcus fell into a depression that lasted months. He stopped going to the restaurant, stopped seeing friends, stopped caring about anything. His family rallied around him. Lynn cooked his favorite meals. Jade visited every day, bringing movies and books in desperate attempts to make him smile. And slowly, reluctantly, Marcus started to heal. Or at least he started to pretend. 6 months after Olivia disappeared, a family friend started coming around more often. Vanessa Park had known the Chens for years, had gone to high school with Jade, had always harbored a quiet crush on Marcus. She was kind, patient, uncomplicated. Everything Olivia hadn't been. Lynn encouraged the relationship. Jade approved. Even Marcus, in his grief and confusion, found comfort in Vanessa's presence. She didn't ask questions about Olivia. She didn't push him to talk about his feelings. She just existed beside him, steady and safe. By the end of 2019, Marcus and Vanessa were officially dating. They went to family dinners together, took weekend trips to Virginia Beach, talked about the future in vague, hopeful terms. In January of 2020, they got engaged. Marcus proposed in the same restaurant where he'd first met Olivia, though he never told Vanessa that detail. It felt like closure, like he was reclaiming a space that had been tainted by betrayal. They moved into the Chun family home together, taking over the second floor, planning a wedding for the following spring. Lynn was thrilled. Jade was thrilled. Derek was supportive in his quiet way. Marcus was happy, or at least he thought he was. There was always something missing, some hollow space in his chest he couldn't name. But he told himself it was just scar tissue from Olivia. That time would heal it. That Vanessa was his second chance. Meanwhile, less than 40 miles away, Olivia Hartwell was counting the days on the wall of her prison. 1,796 days. That's how long Olivia spent in that basement. Almost 5 years of her life, stolen, erased, buried alive while the world moved on without her. She created routines to stay sane. She exercised every morning, push-ups and sit-ups and running in place until her lungs burned. She recited poetry she'd memorized in college. She sang songs from her childhood. She talked to herself, long rambling conversations about anything and everything just to hear a human voice, even if it was her own. She tried to escape twice. The first time was 6 months into her captivity. She'd noticed that Lynn sometimes left the door unlocked for a few seconds while bringing in supplies. Olivia waited, patient, watching for her moment. When it came, she bolted, made it to the top of the basement stairs before Derek Wu tackled her, dragged her back down, threw her into the room, and installed a second lock. The second escape attempt was a year later. She'd managed to loosen one of the basement window frames, a tiny window near the ceiling that was painted shut. It took her 3 months of work, using a spoon to chip away at the paint and wood. She got the window open, squeezed halfway through, and then realized she was 30 feet off the ground with no way down. She hung there, stuck, until Lynn found her and pulled her back inside. After that, they boarded up the window. But Olivia never stopped fighting. She kept herself sharp, mentally and physically, because she knew that if she gave up, if she let herself sink into despair, she'd never get out. She thought about Marcus constantly, wondered if he missed her, if he'd tried to find her, if he ever thought about the life they could have had. She didn't know that Marcus had moved on, that he was engaged to someone else, that he was living in the same house where she'd been drugged and taken. She didn't know that her father, Governor Robert Hartwell, had filed a missing persons report and then quietly buried it when the investigation went nowhere. She didn't know that the world had forgotten her. All she knew was that she had to survive. And then, in November of 2023, something shifted. Jade Chunwoo had given birth to a daughter in August, a beautiful baby girl named Sophie. And motherhood changed something fundamental in Jade. Every time she looked at her daughter, she saw Olivia's face. She imagined Sophie locked in a basement, scared and alone, and the guilt became unbearable. She started having panic attacks, nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, convinced she could hear Olivia pounding on the walls. Derek noticed. He tried to comfort her, told her they'd done what they had to do, that Olivia had brought this on herself. But Jade couldn't shake it. She went to the farmhouse one day, alone, while Lynn was out of town visiting relatives. She stood outside the basement door for 20 minutes, her hand on the lock, debating. Finally, she opened it. Olivia was sitting on the bed, her hair gray, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. Jade expected anger, violence, rage. Instead, Olivia just looked at her and asked, "How old is she?" "Your daughter." Jade broke down. She told Olivia everything. That Marcus had moved on, that he was engaged to Vanessa, that he had no idea what his family had done, that the whole thing had been Lynn's idea, but they'd all gone along with it, convinced themselves it was necessary. Olivia listened without interrupting. When Jade finished, she asked one question. "Will you let me go?" Jade said no. Not yet. But she started leaving the door unlocked. Just for a few minutes at a time. Testing herself. Testing Olivia. Waiting to see what would happen. On November 18th, 2023, Olivia made her decision. The door was unlocked. Jade had left it that way for 10 minutes, longer than usual. Olivia waited 5 minutes to make sure it wasn't a test. Then she walked out. Up the stairs. Through the empty farmhouse. Out the front door. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but the reality was overwhelming. The sun was so bright it hurt her eyes. The air was cold, sharp, real. She was wearing the same clothes she'd been taken in, a sweater and jeans that hung loose on her emaciated frame. She had no shoes, no phone, no idea where she was. She just started walking. She followed the road, one foot in front of the other, her body screaming in protest after years of confinement. After 2 miles, she heard a truck approaching. She stepped into the middle of the road, arms raised, desperate. The truck stopped. The driver, a man in his 50s named Tom Bradley, rolled down his window and asked if she was okay. Olivia tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Tom got out of the truck. He offered her a blanket, water. He asked if she needed help, and Olivia finally found her voice. She told him she'd been held prisoner, that she needed to call the police. Tom didn't hesitate. He called 911 right there, stayed with Olivia until the sheriff's department arrived. When the deputies showed up, Olivia was sitting on the side of the road, wrapped in Tom's blanket, shaking. They asked her name. She looked up at them and said 4 words that would change everything. "I'm Olivia Hartwell, the governor's daughter." The deputies didn't believe her at first. The missing persons report had been filed 5 years ago and closed due to lack of evidence. Olivia Mason, a nurse from Richmond, had simply vanished. No one had connected her to the governor. But Olivia recited her social security number, her father's private phone number, details about the governor's mansion that only family would know. The deputies called it in. Within an hour, the FBI was involved. Within 2 hours, Governor Robert Hartwell was on a helicopter to the location where his daughter had been found. The reunion was brief, awkward, filmed by news crews who'd somehow gotten wind of the story. Robert hugged his daughter, but Olivia barely responded. She was in shock, her mind still trying to process freedom. The FBI took her statement that night. 6 hours of recorded testimony, Olivia describing every detail of her captivity. The basement, the weekly visits from Lynn, the 2 escape attempts, the 5 years of isolation. She told them about the confrontation in the kitchen, about the drugged water, about waking up imprisoned. She gave them names: Lin Chun, Jade Chun Wu, Derek Wu. She told them about Marcus, about how he had no idea, about how she still loved him even after everything. The arrests happened before dawn the next morning. FBI agents surrounded the Chun family home, executing search warrants, taking Lin, Jade, and Derek into custody. Marcus woke up to agents in his bedroom, shouting commands, pulling him out of bed. Vanessa was screaming. Lin was crying, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. Jade confessed immediately, breaking down in the back of the patrol car, telling them everything. Derek stayed silent, lawyered up before they even reached the station. And Marcus, poor Marcus, had no idea what was happening. He was separated from his family, taken to FBI headquarters, placed in an interrogation room with two agents who proceeded to tell him that his ex-fiancée, Olivia Mason, was actually Olivia Hartwell, daughter of the governor, and that his family had held her captive for 5 years. Marcus laughed. He actually laughed. He thought it was a joke, some kind of mistake. Then they showed him the evidence. Photos of the basement, Lin's visitor logs, Jade's confession. Marcus stopped laughing. He asked to see Olivia. They told him she was in protective custody, undergoing medical and psychological evaluation. He asked if she was okay. They said physically she'd recover. Mentally, it would take years. Marcus asked the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Did she think I knew? The agents looked at each other. Then one of them said, "We don't think so. She kept saying you were a victim too." Marcus put his head in his hands and wept. He was questioned for 12 hours straight. The FBI went through every detail of his relationship with Olivia, the disappearance, his relationship with Vanessa, looking for any sign he'd been complicit. But every piece of evidence confirmed what Olivia had said. Marcus didn't know. He'd been manipulated, lied to, kept in the dark by the people he trusted most. The fake text messages from Olivia's phone had been sent by Lin using a burner phone. The story about Olivia running away had been carefully constructed and reinforced over 5 years. Marcus had been a victim of his own family's crime. When they finally released him, he walked out of FBI headquarters to a media circus. Reporters screaming questions, cameras flashing, strangers yelling that he must have known, that he was complicit, that he deserved prison too. Vanessa was waiting for him. She drove him home in silence. When they got to the house, Marcus asked her a simple question. "Did you know?" Vanessa hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. She admitted that Lin had told her something, back in 2019, about Olivia being taken care of. Vanessa said she hadn't wanted details, hadn't asked questions. She'd convinced herself it meant Lin had paid Olivia off, that Olivia had left willingly. Marcus asked her to leave. She did. The trial began in March of 2024. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The basement prison, the locks, the grocery receipts, Lin's financial records showing she'd used money from a loan to pay Derek for the sedatives, Jade's confession, phone records. Everything pointed to premeditated kidnapping and false imprisonment. The defense tried to argue that Lin had suffered a mental breakdown, that she genuinely believed she was protecting her son from a con artist. They painted Olivia as a liar who'd brought this on herself by hiding her identity. They called character witnesses who testified that Lin was a loving mother, a pillar of the community, incapable of such cruelty. But the jury didn't buy it. The evidence was too clear. The crime too calculated. On June 12, 2024, Lin Chun was found guilty on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, assault. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in prison with no possibility of parole. Lin showed no emotion as the sentence was read, just stared straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap, accepting her fate. Jade Chinwoo's trial was separate. Her defense team argued she'd been coerced by her mother, that she'd been suffering from postpartum depression, that letting Olivia escape proved she'd had a change of heart. The prosecution countered that Jade had been an active participant for 5 years, that postpartum depression didn't excuse kidnapping, that her guilt didn't undo the damage. The jury deliberated for 3 days. They found her guilty, but recommended leniency. She was sentenced to 15 years. Derek Wu took a plea deal. He testified against Lin in exchange for a reduced sentence, 12 years. He'd be eligible for parole in 8. The trials dominated national news for months. Every detail of Olivia's captivity was dissected, analyzed, debated. Legal experts argued about culpability. Psychologists discussed trauma. The public was divided. Some saw Olivia as a victim who'd made a mistake by hiding her identity. Others saw her as partly responsible for triggering the chain of events. The question everyone asked was, could this have been prevented if she'd just been honest from the start? But the trials revealed something else, something that shocked even those who'd followed the case closely. Vanessa Park had known more than she'd initially admitted. Court documents showed that Lynn had confided in Vanessa in late 2019, telling her that Olivia had been dealt with and that Vanessa needed to keep Marcus happy and distracted. Vanessa had never asked what that meant. She'd never reported it to authorities. She'd simply accepted her role in the cover-up because it benefited her. She was charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. She took a plea deal, admitted her guilt, and was sentenced to 5 years probation with community service. Her nursing license was revoked. Her family disowned her. She moved back to California and disappeared from public life. Marcus Chen testified at all 3 trials. He took the stand and told the truth about everything. His relationship with Olivia, the fake text message, his complete ignorance of his family's crime, his relationship with Vanessa. The prosecution never charged him with anything. There was no evidence he'd known. But the court of public opinion was less forgiving. Half the country believed him. Half thought he was either complicit or willfully blind. Marcus couldn't walk down the street without being recognized, harassed, photographed. He closed the family restaurants, put the house up for sale, and then he disappeared. Olivia's recovery was slow and painful. She spent 6 months in a private psychiatric facility, working through the trauma of 5 years in captivity. She suffered from severe PTSD, panic attacks, night terrors. She couldn't sleep in enclosed spaces, couldn't handle silence, couldn't trust anyone. But slowly, with therapy and medication and the support of a few close friends she'd had before everything happened, she started to heal. In January of 2025, Olivia made a decision that surprised everyone. She filed a $200 million civil lawsuit against the Chen family estate. Her lawyers argued that 5 years of her life had been stolen, that she'd suffered immeasurable psychological damage, that the Chen family's assets should be liquidated to compensate her for what they'd taken. The lawsuit was successful. The family restaurants, the house, Lynn's savings, everything was seized. Olivia was awarded $86 million, the total value of the estate plus punitive damages. She donated half of it to organizations that helped victims of kidnapping and false imprisonment. She used the rest to start a nonprofit. But money and justice weren't enough to quiet the questions that haunted Olivia. She needed the world to know the whole truth. In March of 2025, she did something even her lawyers advised against. She went public. She did a tell-all interview with a major network. She wrote a memoir titled The Locked Room that became an instant bestseller. And in her book, she revealed something that shocked everyone, including her own father. Governor Robert Hartwell had known his daughter was missing. He'd filed the missing persons report. But when the investigation stalled, when detectives couldn't find any leads, he'd made a choice. He'd quietly closed the case. He'd told his staff to stop looking. Because the longer Olivia was missing, the more questions people asked about the governor's family, about his parenting, about his priorities. It was becoming a political liability. So he'd buried it, moved on, focused on his Senate campaign. He'd convinced himself that Olivia had run away, that she was an adult and had the right to disappear if she wanted to. He'd chosen his career over his daughter. The revelation destroyed what was left of Governor Hartwell's reputation. The man who'd built— And what about Olivia now? As of late 2025, Olivia Hartwell is 38 years old. She runs a nonprofit called the Light Foundation that provides legal and psychological support to survivors of family abduction and false imprisonment. She speaks at conferences. She lobbies for stronger laws protecting victims. She's become an advocate, using her story to help others who've lived through similar nightmares. And against all odds, she's found love again. In her memoir, she mentions a man named James, someone she knew before Marcus, before the kidnapping, before everything. They'd been friends in college. He'd reached out after seeing her story on the news. They'd reconnected slowly, carefully. In October of 2025, they got engaged. This time, there are no secrets, no hidden identities. Just two people who've both been through hell and found their way back to something like happiness. But the scars remain. Olivia still can't sleep in complete darkness. She still panics in small spaces. She still wakes up sometimes convinced she's back in that basement, that the last 6 years have been a dream and she's still locked away. Therapy helps. Medication helps. But some damage is permanent. In interviews, when people ask if she's forgiven the Chen family, Olivia is honest. She says forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process. Some days she feels nothing but pity for Lynn, a woman so consumed by fear and greed that she destroyed her own family. Other days she feels rage so intense she has to leave the room. She's forgiven Jade, mostly because Jade was the one who finally let her go. She hasn't forgiven Derek or Vanessa. They made choices. They stayed silent. They chose comfort over conscience. As for Marcus, Olivia says forgiveness doesn't apply. He wasn't the one who needed forgiving. He was just collateral damage in his family's war against her. The Chen family is scattered now, broken, destroyed by their own actions. Lynn Chen is in Virginia Women's Correctional Facility, serving her 35-year sentence. She's appealing, but legal experts say she'll die in prison. She's 69 years old. Inmate reports say she keeps to herself, works in the prison library, writes letters that no one responds to. Jade Chenwu is serving her 15 years in the same facility, though they're kept in separate blocks. She filed for divorce from Derek while in prison. Her daughter Sophie is being raised by Derek's parents. Jade spends her time in prison writing letters to Olivia, long rambling apologies and explanations that Olivia has never opened. They arrive every few months, forwarded by Olivia's lawyers, and Olivia puts them in a box in her closet without reading them. Maybe someday she will. Maybe not. Derek Wu is in a federal prison in West Virginia. He'll be eligible for parole in 2032. He's taking college courses, learning to code, planning for a future outside prison walls. He's never tried to contact Olivia. Vanessa Park completed her probation in 2024. She moved back to California, to a small town near Sacramento where no one knows her story. She works as a medical assistant, a job that doesn't require a nursing license. She keeps her head down, avoids social media, refuses all interview requests. A journalist tracked her down in late 2025 and asked if she had any regrets. Vanessa said yes. She regretted everything. But regret doesn't undo damage. It doesn't give Olivia back the 5 years she lost. It just sits there, heavy and useless. And Marcus Chen, or Michael Brennan as he's now legally known, remains a mystery. Those who claim to have seen him in Seattle say he looks older than his years. Tired. Haunted. He works long hours. Doesn't socialize. Doesn't date. Just cooks and goes home to an apartment he shares with a roommate who doesn't know his real identity. He's built a small life, a quiet life, as far from Richmond and the Chen family legacy as possible. Some people say he's a coward for disappearing. Others say he's smart. He lost everything through no fault of his own. Why shouldn't he start over? This case raises questions that don't have easy answers. Questions about trust and betrayal. About how well we really know the people we love. About the choices we make when we're afraid and how those choices ripple outward, destroying everything they touch. Lynn Chen believed she was protecting her son. That belief led her to commit an unspeakable crime. Jade Chenwu convinced herself she was being loyal to her family. That conviction made her complicit in 5 years of torture. Derek Wu and Vanessa Park told themselves they didn't really know what was happening. That willful ignorance allowed them to profit from someone else's suffering. And Marcus Chen trusted his family blindly. That trust cost him the woman he loved and the life he'd built. The question that haunts this entire story is, could this have been prevented? If Olivia had been honest about her identity from the start, would Lynn have reacted differently? Would the paranoia and fear have been avoided? Or was Lynn's financial desperation and controlling nature always going to lead to disaster? If Marcus had questioned his mother's story about Olivia running away, if he'd pushed harder to find her, would he have uncovered the truth? Or was he too broken, too trusting, too willing to believe the people he loved? If Governor Hartwell had kept searching for his daughter instead of closing the case, would Olivia have been found sooner? Or would the Chen family have simply hidden her better, moved her somewhere even more remote? The truth is, we'll never know. We can only look at what happened and try to make sense of the senseless. What we do know is that 3 people are in prison. A 4th is on probation. A 5th has disappeared. And Olivia Hartwell, the woman at the center of this nightmare, is still fighting to reclaim her life. She's 38 years old. She should be thinking about marriage and career and maybe starting a family. Instead, she's thinking about PTSD triggers and therapy appointments and how to help other people survive what she survived. She's turned her trauma into purpose. But that doesn't make the trauma any less real. It doesn't give her back the 5 years she spent in darkness. It doesn't erase the fact that the people who were supposed to become her family locked her in a basement and tried to erase her from existence. This story doesn't have a happy ending. It has a survivable one. Olivia survived. Marcus survived. But survival isn't the same as healing. Some wounds are too deep. Some scars never fade. And some questions never get answered. The final question this case forces us to confront is, what would you do? If you discovered that someone close to you, someone you trusted, had been lying about something fundamental, how would you react? Would you give them a chance to explain? Or would fear and betrayal override your reason? If someone you loved was in trouble, drowning in debt or desperation, how far would you go to protect them? Would you compromise your morals? Commit crimes? Destroy innocent people? And if you found out that your family had done something unforgivable, would you have the courage to turn them in? Or would loyalty keep you silent? These aren't hypothetical questions. The Chen family faced them. They chose wrong. They chose fear over compassion, control over trust, silence over truth. And their choices destroyed everyone involved. This is the world we live in, where the people who promise to protect us can become the ones who hurt us most, where love can twist into possession, where families can become prisons. Olivia Hartwell learned that lesson the hardest way possible. She spent 5 years in a locked room, betrayed by the people who should have welcomed her with open arms. But she survived. She escaped. She rebuilt. And she's making sure that her story, as painful as it is, might prevent someone else from suffering the same fate. That's not redemption, but it's something. It's a light in the darkness. And sometimes, that's all we get.